What it do, fellas? Season 22 is here, and as we trial these new essences, let's first take a look back at some of Season 21's top PvP players and their builds. Before we begin, I just want to say thank you to all of you that helped me make this video possible, allowing me to showcase unique builds and playstyles from a few of East Coast top-ranked Battlegrounds players. We'll be looking at nominated wells and welterweights for each class that have shown exceptional score and skill on the battlefield. So without further ado, let Season 21 showcase begin.
Barbarian, HX Odin versus Sir Executioner.
Starting off our whales, we have the unstoppable HX Odin. This heartless terror demoralizingly shouts, preventing all forms of loss of control with increased duration by the dishonored blade. From the pants and chest of Ram's Impasse and Tracker's Rage, he furiously charges through enemy front lines, dragging along his victims with increased damage. But it seems that Odin's true power lies within the ardent and the rending bite, transforming his primary attack into a weapon of mass destruction. For sets, Odin is wearing a 4-piece Vithus to extend the duration of beneficial effects with increased attack speed, alongside a 4-piece Gloom, increasing damage and critical hit chance after using a dash. Now, representing for the Barbarian welterweight, we have the Executioner, showing off his own unique build and playstyle, as the victims of this Berserker's wrath were found to be cleaved in half. From the essences of Silver Flash, Lurker's Last Chance, and the Flesh Splitter, Executioner's Cleave becomes a powerful channeling knockback. From the chest of the Window of Waiting and the pants of the Screaming Fury, none have escaped this Executioner's chopping block, charging headlong into enemy territory, slowing and knocking enemies high into the air. The sets for this Executioner are a 4-set Mountain Banks with a 4-set of the Seeds of the Sown Gold, providing him a shield with 33% of his life, allowing him to move unhindered through enemies, as the seeds will give him a 30% increased damage to the skill that he is channeling.
Bloodknight, Soybeans versus Cold.
Just watch as Soybeans moves through the battlefield with ease, avoiding damage by alternating Sanguinate and Swarm of Bats, poisoning and corroding enemy armor, Solid Snare, Teeming Grotto, and Faces of Fading Mirth. Not even on the brink of death will stop this vampiric pursuit. From the Horns of the Hex and the main hand of the Broken, Siphon Life now follows you, dealing increased damage to nearby enemies. For our set, Soybeans is wearing a 6-set of the Gloom, creating a massive damaging wave of terror each dash, as well as a 2-set Vithus, increasing the duration of beneficial effects. Now, for our welterweight, we have the Frozen Hearted Cold, showing us a similar build with a few alterations, as both of these Blood Knights stalk and skewer their unsuspecting victims from the Beslayer, Soul, and Sprig, allowing them to leap high into the air, descending down and slaying their enemies in one fell swoop. As Soy relies on the power of Shadow's Edge, Cold empowers his Ravage from the main hand of Exquisite Silence, causing enemies to bleed, while sending a Storm of Bats from the Golden Scold, dealing damage and reducing nearby enemy movement speed. Cold is using a 4-set Feasting Barons, increasing the damage dealt from all sources to enemies suffering loss of control, adding in a 2-set Grace and a 2-set Mountain Banks, increasing all continual, persistent, and channeled damage while providing a shield for 13% of his maximum life.
Crusader, Factor versus Bosis.
Changing his name to show some love to another DI streamer, Factor, guided by his faith, this luminous ascendant summons a powerful following sword, leading the charge for his allies, condemning all that impede his holy conquest. From the Reproach, Refrain, Heart of the Grandeur, and the Blinding Wall, Factor transforms his condemn into a massive blinding light, damaging nearby enemies and triggering all continual damaging effects. Factor is wearing a 6-set Banquet of the Eyes, increasing his critical hit chance and damage of all continual damaging effects, triggering a Poisonous Rage, with a 2-set of the Vithus, increasing the duration of beneficial effects. When all hope seems lost, this welterweight rushes to the rescue, for Bosis leaves no man behind, supporting his allies with the Holy Banner and Conjuration of Light, with increased duration from the shoulders of the Wind-Blessed Pauldrons, and the Helm of the Arrow Keeper, allowing Holy Banner to move along with him. For Bosis refuses to allow the actions of his enemies to go unpunished, empowering his primary attack with the essences of the Observer and the Buckler. Each strike of Punish now increases the damage dealt to the target, while a successful block sends an explosive counter-strike to all nearby enemies. For our sets, Bosis is wearing a 4-set Mountain Banks with a 2-set Vithus and a 2-set Feasting Barons.
Demon Honor, Breaky versus Toasted.
Our next whale is adored by his team and feared by his foes, introducing the unrelenting Führer Freaky. Leading the charge, he swings into action, eliminating one target after the next with a barrage of consistently firing shadow clones. From the offhand of the Fallow Farm, he leaves his enemies in a state of utter turmoil. Paired with the chest of the Scattered Disciples, Strife now fires homing rockets with increased critical hit chance to enemies below 50% health. For Freaky's theory of retribution is punishment by death, increasing the damage dealt by his primary attack after 3 consecutive shots. For our sets, Freaky is wearing a 4-set Gloom, increasing the damage dealt after a dash, and a 4-set Vithus, increasing the duration of beneficial effects. For Toasted 2 shares in many of the Führer's theories, but prefers to not escalate unneeded violence. By mastering the art of discretion, this trained assassin stealthily infiltrates the enemy's safeguard. From the shoulders, pants, and helm, Escape now lunges you forward, slowing and damaging nearby enemies while providing you a shield with increased cooldown reduction. From the shadows, Toasted prepares to enact his vengeance, as his hatred for his enemies can no longer be sheathed, swiftly silencing his target as his chest vengeance now fully consumes him, increasing his primary attack speed, but he is no longer able to specifically target enemies. For sets, Toasted is using a 4-set Mountain Banks and a 4-set Vithus, providing him a shield with increased duration of beneficial effects.
Monk, King EPK versus Honk.
Our next whale hails all the way from the Shaolin Monastery, renowned for its tranquil views and teachings of Kung Fu. May I introduce the Abbot of the Monks, the Sensei of the Strikes, the Master of the Martial Arts, King EPK. For this sin-minded intervening law, he maintains the balance with his helm and main hand. Shield of Zen now dispels harmful effects, while providing an additional dash, shielding nearby allies. From the chest, main, and offhand, increasing the duration of Inner Sanctuary grants those that stand within increased damage and prevention of knockback effects. For sets, EPK is using a 4-set Mountain Bank with a 4-set Vithus. For our welterweight, we have another loyal disciple of the monastery, trained under the apprenticeship of the abbot. Introducing Master Honk. By his ability to envelop himself within the shrouding fog, he infiltrates through the enemy lines undetected, as Mystic Strike now allows him to become invisible, as the pants of the Traveling Scold charge him to his target's location, dealing damage to all nearby enemies and knocking them into the air, with increased invasion from the shoulders of the ascending rain cloud, finishing his foes with his signature deadly 3-hit combo. As the main hands of the Archery Ascendant and the Perilous Conductor, his deadly reach knocks enemies into the air while increasing their damage they receive. For our sets, Honk is wearing a 4-set Mountain Bank with a 2-set Shabazz and a 2-set Feasting Barons.
Necromancer, Gamori versus Toxic MF.
Showcasing his own unique build, the Grim Reaper of the battlefield, Kamui crushes his enemies by summoning colossal flaming giants. As the enemies are vulnerable to the radiating heat, Kamui demonstrates his dominance. As one golem falls, 2 rise to take its place, while shielding a portion of incoming damage from the Unservable 2, Desolatoria, Corrosive Slab, and the dominance from Dust. Horrified, the enemy attempts to flee behind their walls, only to be struck down from catapulted remains of their fallen comrades. For sets, Kamui is wearing a 6-set Banquet of the Eyes and a 2-set of the Feasting Barons. For our welterweight prefers a more traditional style of build, introducing the Conqueror of Control, the Jester of Juggle, the original necrotic nuisance himself, Toxic MF, challenging even the fiercest of foes, as he supports his allies by blocking, bleeding, slowing, burning, while consistently knocking up the enemy with precisely timed rotation skill. From the essence of the backbone, Bonewall now summons a pillar of rotting corpses, slowing and knocking up nearby enemies. As Toxic lures his unsuspecting victims into his well-placed trap, barricading them in, he ignites the walls with soul fire, as he watches his victims burn alive. From the offhands of the Spite Feeder and the Allure, Bonewall can now be ignited with Soulfire, dealing increased damage to nearby enemies. For our sets, Toxic is wearing a 4-set of the Conflagration, adding an additional burn as he increases the effects of continual damage and harmful effects from the Banquet of the Eyes 2-set and a Feasting Barons 2-set.
Wizard, Gilgamesh versus Soj.
Our next whale was the youngest wizard ever admitted to the Academy, mastering all 4 elements his first year, our Academy's very own headmaster. Introducing Grandmaster Gilgamesh. Ensuring the safety of his students, patrolling the grounds, he ports from one section of the kingdom to the next, carving a powerful defensive rift between the Academy and the outside world. As enemies approach the barrier, they are met with heat-seeking arcane missiles, dealing massive damage from the pants of the Novel Castigation and the main hand of the Rift Carver. Proficient in close quarters combat, knocking back approaching enemies with the radiating heat of his orbiting flames. From the Memory and the Burden, Scorch now summons 4 rotating balls that orbit around him, knocking back enemies from the shoulder. For our Grandmaster sets, he is using a 6-set Grace with a 2-set Mountain Banks. For our last welterweight, we have the Dean of Defense against the Dark Arts, the seasoned streaming, spellbound spectacle himself, Sorcerer Soj, showing us a similar but more support style of the build. From the pants, main, and offhand, Arcane Wind now summons a Wind Core with increased charges, continually pulling nearby enemies in with increased damage. As the enemies struggle to escape these violent winds, Soj swiftly incinerates his foes, spewing static sparks and engulfing his enemy with a raging firestorm. For sets, he's wearing a 4-set Banquet of the Eyes and a 4-set Feasting Barons. There you have it, fellas. That concludes Season 21 Showcase. Now, Season 22 is already in the works, but West Coast, I need y'all's help to nominate some of y'all's best PvP players for Season 22. To nominate a player, message it in the live, and I'll catch you all in the next one.